There's a plant growing in your yard right now. It is probably growing in the crack of your sidewalk. It is growing in every park, every lawn, and every untended patch of dirt in your neighborhood. You have walked past it 1,000 times assuming it was a weed. You have probably pulled it and thrown it away. But for over 2,000 years, this plant was the most important first aid tool in the world. Army medics carried it into battle. Surgeons applied it before antiseptics existed. Mothers reached for it when children were injured. And one leaf, chewed and applied to a cut, stops bleeding in 30 seconds, through a mechanism that modern science has fully documented and confirmed. A plant that costs nothing, that grows everywhere, that carries 2 documented hemostatic compounds and a powerful antiseptic. And that the pharmaceutical first aid industry has spent 100 years replacing with bandage products that cost $20 for a box of 10. This plant was not folk medicine, it was military medicine. It was standard medicine before the age of synthetic pharmaceuticals. Field medics in World War I and World War II carried knowledge of this plant because supply lines could be cut, because bandages ran out, because bleeding wounds required immediate management with whatever was available. The ability to identify and apply this plant was considered a survival skill. It was documented in military survival manuals. It was taught to soldiers. And then an entire generation of peacetime prosperity replaced it with an aisle at the pharmacy. The knowledge was not updated. It was abandoned. Then someone in a corporate boardroom did the math. The global wound care and first aid market generates over $20 billion annually. Adhesive bandages, hemostatic gauze, antiseptic products, and wound closure strips represent a product ecosystem built on the premise that managing a wound requires manufactured products purchased from a retailer. A free plant growing in every yard that stops bleeding faster than most of these products while providing antiseptic coverage is not a competitor. It is an existential challenge to the concept that first aid requires a product. And that concept is worth $20 billion. Welcome to Forbidden Fix. If these stories matter to you, hit subscribe and the bell. This is where we dig up what industries spent decades trying to erase. The plant is Plantago major, common broadleaf plantain. Not the banana-like cooking plantain. The ground-hugging rosette weed with broad oval leaves and parallel veins that grows in every disturbed soil environment in the temperate world. It originated in Eurasia and has been introduced to every continent. It is one of the most widespread plants on Earth. You almost certainly have it within 50 feet of where you are right now. To understand why it works, you need to understand what it contains at the biochemical level. Plantago major has been extensively analyzed by phytochemists, and the active compounds responsible for its medicinal properties are thoroughly documented. The primary hemostatic compound is aucubin, an iridoid glycoside. When Plantago major leaf is crushed or chewed, enzymes in the plant tissue hydrolyze the aucubin into aggregation derivatives that act on blood coagulation pathways. Specifically, these compounds promote platelet aggregation and accelerate the initial phase of the coagulation cascade, the process by which blood changes from liquid to clot. A 2011 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology confirmed that Plantago major extract significantly reduced clotting time in both in vitro and in vivo models. The hemostatic effect is real, measurable, and reproducible. The second major active compound is ursolic acid, a pentacyclic triterpenoid with documented anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Ursolic acid inhibits the inflammatory cytokines that cause wound swelling and tissue damage in the hours following injury. It also disrupts the cell membranes of multiple bacterial species, providing a natural antiseptic function. A comprehensive review published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology in 2014 documented ursolic acid's antimicrobial efficacy against Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus species, and Escherichia coli, all common wound contaminants. The plant simultaneously stops bleeding, reduces inflammation, and kills bacteria. This combination, in a free plant growing on every lawn, outperforms the function of most consumer wound care products in the first 5 minutes of wound management. Allantoin, another compound found in Plantago major, promotes cellular regeneration and accelerates wound healing. This is the same compound found in commercial wound healing creams and skincare products at concentrations that companies spend significant research and development budgets to achieve. Plantago major contains it naturally in the leaf tissue. Before I go further, this video covers the acute wound management application. Inside the Forbidden Fix vault, I have compiled complete wilderness, first aid, and botanical medicine guides covering identification of hemostatic plants across every climate zone, urban foraging maps for common medicinal plants, wound management protocols for emergency situations, and the complete field medicine knowledge base that military survival instructors teach. The link is in the description. But stay right here, because the history of how this plant was removed from common medical knowledge is a story that repeats itself across every generation. Hippocrates documented Plantago major for wound treatment in the 5th century BC. Dioscorides, the Greek physician who wrote De Materia Medica, the foundational text of Western pharmacology used for 1,500 years, listed Plantago as a hemostatic and wound-healing herb. Native American medical traditions across dozens of tribal groups, from the Cherokee to the Iroquois to Plains nations, independently documented broadleaf plantain for wound closure and infection prevention. Surgeons during the American Civil War carried knowledge of plantain and other hemostatic botanicals for use when bandage supplies were exhausted. World War I, British and French military field manuals included identification guides for hemostatic plants. The United States Army Survival Manual, FM 305-70, published as recently as 2002, includes Plantago major as an identified medicinal plant with documented hemostatic and antiseptic properties. The knowledge was never erased from military doctrine. It was erased from civilian awareness. The modern first aid industry emerged alongside the pharmaceutical revolution of the early 20th century. As synthetic antiseptics, sterile bandages, and pharmaceutical wound treatments became available, the medical establishment correctly shifted toward their use for professional medical care, where consistency, sterility, and dosage control are paramount. But this shift was extended inappropriately to the civilian field context. The message became that natural wound management was primitive and unreliable, that a plant was not an appropriate first aid tool. This message served the market perfectly. It created dependency on manufactured products for wound situations that could be addressed with freely available biological resources. The plant did not become less effective. The economic incentive to replace it became stronger. If you have made it this far, you understand more about wound hemostasis and botanical medicine than 99% of people who keep a box of adhesive bandages for minor wounds and have never looked down at the plantain growing at their feet. Subscribe and share. Knowing this could matter in a moment that matters. Here is exactly how to use it. Step 1. Identify the plant. Broadleaf plantain, Plantago major, has broad oval leaves with 5 to 7 parallel veins running the length of the leaf. The veins are particularly visible when you tear the leaf and pull it apart slowly. The veins remain connected as stringy fibers. It grows as a flat rosette close to the ground. No other common weed has this exact combination of features. Step 2. For acute bleeding from a cut or wound, pick 2 to 3 fresh, undamaged green leaves. Avoid leaves that are yellowed, wilted, or growing near areas of chemical application like treated lawns. Step 3. Clean the leaf surface by wiping it quickly with clean water if available. Step 4. Either chew the leaf briefly until it forms a moist, mashed poultice, or crush it firmly between clean fingers to release the juices and break down the cell structure. The aucubin compounds are activated by enzymatic hydrolysis when the cells are disrupted. Step 5. Apply the poultice directly to the wound, pressing firmly with gentle pressure for 30 to 60 seconds. You will see the bleeding slow and, in most cases, stop within 30 to 60 seconds. Step 6. Hold the poultice in place with a cloth strip or bandage if available. Replace with a fresh poultice every 15 to 20 minutes for the first hour. Step 7. For the urban alternative where plantain may not be immediately accessible, a wet black tea bag applied with firm pressure is highly effective. Black tea contains tannins, specifically epigallocatechin gallate, and related compounds, which are astringent hemostats that precipitate proteins and constrict blood vessels at the wound surface. Many dentists already recommend wet tea bags for post-extraction bleeding control. I need to be honest with you. Plantago major poultice is an excellent first aid tool for minor to moderate wounds. In situations where professional medical care is not immediately available, it is not a substitute for emergency medical treatment for severe lacerations, arterial bleeding, puncture wounds, or any wound that does not stop bleeding within 5 to 10 minutes of pressure application. If bleeding is severe, if the wound is deep, if you cannot see the bottom of the wound, or if the wound is in a high-risk location, seek emergency medical care immediately. The poultice is not sterile. While it provides meaningful antimicrobial activity through ursolic acid, it does not provide the sterility of commercially produced wound dressings. Any wound managed with a botanical poultice should be cleaned thoroughly with clean water and soap as soon as practical and evaluated for professional care if there is any sign of infection, including redness, warmth, swelling, or discharge. This is knowledge for survival situations and minor wound management, not a reason to delay necessary medical care. Your grandmother knew this plant by a common name: plantain weed, ribwort, cart track plant. She knew that when a child scraped a knee in the garden, you picked a leaf, chewed it, and pressed it on the wound. Not because she was primitive, because she was practical, because knowledge that has accumulated across 4,000 years of human medical experience tends to have a foundation in biochemical reality. Then television told her grandchildren that wound care required a product from a store. The plant was reclassified as a weed. The knowledge was reclassified as folklore. And an entire generation grew up walking past one of the most effective natural hemostats on the planet without recognizing it. There was not a better wound treatment available in the yard. There was just one that could not be sold. Subscribe and share. Every share preserves what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside might explain how a $2 kitchen trick can revive a plant that looks completely dead in just 24 hours.